You know what? I'm about to say it.
Say it.
This might just be the greatest Batman movie of all time. Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Mike, and I actually got to see the Batman a little early, a few days early on March 1st. I meant to post a review like pretty soon after, but work got in the way as well as illness. I was pretty sick for a little bit there, so I just didn't have the time or the energy to make this video. And frankly, I'm a little glad I waited, because there's so much in this movie to unpack and really think about. I've been able to like ruminate on this a little bit and kind of see other people's reactions before I give my own review. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. I will do like a spoiler fan talk discussion, but this is going to be my spoiler-free review for right now. If you want to skip to the end and just get to like my rating and general thoughts, then use the chapters down below or whatever. So yeah, this movie is frankly the Batman movie I've been waiting for a long time. And now don't get me wrong, there's been plenty of really good Batman movies, but all of them left me a little bit cold. Like, none of them did a perfect job capturing the detective aspect of Batman. His intelligence. He's basically an amateur scientist and, world's greatest detective, as well as capturing his athletic and martial arts ability and his heroism, but also his dark side and the fact that he's just a really traumatized person deep down. No movie's really done that perfectly. I know some people would argue that like The Dark Knight did, but I disagree. I got a little bit of that with like Ben Affleck's Batman and Batman v Superman, but it never really, fully hit home. Now it has. This is arguably a perfect Batman detective movie. It does such a good job blending noir elements and murder mystery crime elements and just blending them all together into a really good cohesive Batman story. And this movie really doesn't take the time to set everything up like most other Batman movies, especially like Batman Begins. They really take a bit of time setting up Batman, like, why he does this, why he does that, or how he has this. They at least mention it. This just kind of jumps right into the middle of everything, kind of like the Arkham games. And speaking of the Arkham games, there are a lot of influences I found in this movie. There are the obvious graphic novels that Warner Brothers themselves released and said were inspired, the inspiration for the movie. Batman Ego, The Long Halloween, and Batman Year One. And you can definitely see those inspirations, those influences in the movie. But I saw a lot of stuff that really reminded me of the Arkham games. I feel like that had an influence on this movie, as well as the Telltale Batman series. There's definitely some elements from the Telltale series that is in this movie. And then, obviously stuff from like David Fincher's movies and like old 1970s and older noir detective series, as well as just the comics themselves. Like, there are elements in this movie, especially in like the beginning, that really make it feel like a legitimate Batman graphic novel brought to life. And I love that so much. There were just moments of this movie where I just sat there like smiling, like, this is awesome. This is what I have been wanting for a while. Honestly, I feel like this movie was probably like the most, at least to me, it felt the most heroic out of all the Batman movies I've seen. Okay, let's talk about the acting. It's what you would come to expect from the talent in this movie. Obviously, Robert Pattinson, a lot of people were doubting him. I never really doubted him, but I wasn't thinking he was going to be my favorite Batman. I think he might be my favorite Batman. I still really like the other versions, especially Ben Affleck's. This version just really gets so many things right. And I'm not going to get into all of it because that'd be too many spoilers, but, I think the main things that it gets right are the Batman's fighting ability, his damaged psyche, obviously the detective skills and the intelligence. That's, But Robert Pattinson does a really good job as Batman, does a really good job with the whole brooding loner, this is obviously an early version of Batman, so, it's not going to be exactly like other versions we've seen even in the comics, but We kind of knew that going into this. Robert's performance as Bruce Wayne was perfect for what they were going for. I've seen a lot of people saying, like, great as Batman, not as Bruce Wayne. There really is no difference between his Batman and Bruce Wayne performance.
Well, no fucking shit.
That's the point. That's what Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson have been saying the last, like, 10 or more months.
That's when it came to me that rather than make Bruce Wayne the Playboy version we've seen before, there's another version who had gone through a great tragedy and become a recluse. So I started making this connection to Gus Van Sant's last days and the idea of this fictionalized version of Kurt Cobain being in this kind of decaying manner.
He doesn't have as much control over his personality. Like, the delineation between when he's Batman and when he's Bruce is not so clear.
You know, even though Batman's in his second year, Bruce hasn't really figured out how to separate Batman and Bruce Wayne. He's like putting all his energy into being Batman. He hasn't figured out the public Bruce Wayne persona, or that he can use his identity as Bruce Wayne to help people as well as Batman. By the end of this movie, you can definitely see that happening in like a sequel. He did exactly what he was supposed to. It was perfect for what it was supposed to be. You can just see it on Robert's face, like as when he is this character. He's serious, but in an almost tragic way. So I think Matt Reeves and the writers and Robert Pattinson all did that perfectly. They did what they said they were going to do. But moving on to the other actors, Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, Selena Kyle, damn near perfect performance. Like, she felt like Catwoman, like right out of the comics, and her chemistry with Robert's actually really good. Probably the most accurate relationship between the two that we've seen on the big screen. Not just comic accurate, but also just realistic. John Turturro as Carmine Falcone, which apparently they call him Falcone in this movie instead of Falcone. I've heard both, whatever. But he's excellent as Falcone. Very much like The Long Halloween, which I was hoping for. Very much like your classic Italian mobster type. So very good there. And he has more of a role than you'd expect. Honestly, all the side characters that seem like they weren't, they are the main villains, but they're in it more than you'd expect. Penguin and Falcone are in it for most of the movie, in different scenes. It's not just like one and done. So that was really cool. And of course they did an amazing job. Colin Farrell, like, he's honestly the comic relief. Like, he's unrecognizable as Penguin. Can't wait for the Penguin spin-off. That'll be interesting because we get to see him actually more becoming the Penguin we know from the comics, one of the head like crime lords of Gotham. So that's really cool. I really look forward to seeing that series. Speaking of like the series branching off, this movie really does a good job world building. It just kind of drops you in the middle of everything and doesn't bother explaining everything, because the movie assumes you know who Batman is and his like relative origins, but this movie doesn't pretend like, ooh, nobody knows who Batman is. It just kind of throws you into the middle of this world. But at the same time, it still is its own thing, very different version, and it is building its own world. You get that feeling that it's not just like, these characters in this part of the city. It really feels like there's a bunch of stuff going on in different aspects of the city, different characters. It's not like everything in the city's revolving around Batman, Paul Dano as Riddler, really good. Has enough aspects of Riddler from the comics and like the Arkham games and stuff, but Paul Dano definitely delivers a Riddler that is sometimes menacing, sometimes just kind of unnerving by how obviously mentally ill he is, and then honestly just kind of entertaining. He does a really good job. Not exactly a super inspired like motivation, but at the same time what he does with his master plan and everything is kind of disturbing and kind of unique, honestly, as far as comic book movies go. So that's kind of cool. Andy Serkis is really good as Alfred. Reminds me a lot of the Earth 1 comics, where he's more of a grizzled like ex-special forces, but at the same time still being kind of like that kindly butler. So we do get that, and he really helps Batman a lot, which I really like about this version and the Jeremy Irons version is Alfred really helps Batman like with his Batman stuff, not just like, would you like a cup of soup, sir? And Jeffrey Wright as Gordon definitely takes his own interpretation, but still obviously still Gordon. I really wish they kind of fleshed him out more as like where he came from and like more of his personal life, I guess, but I really do like this version. He's not as grizzled as some versions, but he's not as necessarily straight-laced as the Gary Oldman version, which I don't mind. He definitely has his own take on the character, but it's still very much James Gordon, and I really like his chemistry with Robert Pattinson. They really work together well, and he really helps Batman a lot. It's not just like Batman like feeding him information. They investigate it together. The story itself is very complicated. The movie is 3 hours long, so I think some people might get bored. Most people I talked to and myself, I did not get bored. It definitely felt long just because of how much happens. It feels almost like a mini series. You know, if you go on quite a journey from the very first minute to the very last minute. You know, a lot happens. You feel like you really like watch these characters grow a bit. So that's really cool. And the story does definitely fit the runtime. I don't think there's a whole lot they could have done to cut the runtime down that wouldn't have been detrimental to the plot or the character development. Maybe like a little bit, but not a whole lot. Oh, and the action's great. The Batmobile and Penguin chase, the Batman and Penguin chase, probably one of the only like car chase scenes in an action movie I've been interested in years. The Batmobile looks awesome, and that whole sequence was great. They did a really great blend of practical and CGI. And I think the action scenes with Batman, the fight scenes, were realistic enough to, you know, be believable and look really cool, but also a little bit like exaggerated enough to be exciting. You know, it's a good mix of realism and flair, I guess. The fighting style honestly reminded me a lot of the Arkham games. Oh, and then the score. Michael Giacchino. Like most movies, most of the score is backdrop to what's going on in the scene, but his main themes for everybody, Riddler, Catwoman, Batman, they're in some ways very simple, but the way he orchestrates them and what he does to build them up and layer them, but also change them throughout the movie, because they do change, even though it plays the same themes a lot throughout the movie. He does it with different instruments, different arrangements in a way that makes it fresh as the movie goes on. And there are times where it is a bit repetitive, so I can understand why some people might not be a huge fan of how many, you know, times he used the theme in the movie, but I thought it was fine. The main theme is like very unrelenting and intense, which really matches the rest of the movie. Oh, and of course the cinematography is freaking spectacular. Everything we saw in the trailers was obviously great, but it's basically like the whole freaking movie is like that, like from the first frame. It's just, there's so many different camera angles and things that they did not have to do, but just add so much style. And just some of the shots, like some of the scenery shots were just beautiful. And there were even moments where they used the cinematography or some camera tricks to like kind of make the violence not as explicit, which I didn't mind because it wasn't like in like a Marvel movie where somebody gets stabbed and there's just like not really any blood. It's more like somebody gets killed on camera, but they do certain camera tricks to make it like stylized where it doesn't really show it, which I thought was actually kind of cool and a better idea than just, you know, pretending like people don't bleed. You know, I just realized that I've been wearing headphones this whole time and I really don't know why. Why stop now? So, yeah. Long story short, basically a masterpiece. By the way, critics who apparently wanted to bring their kids to this movie, sorry, not every movie is going to be suitable for 10-year-old little Timmy, okay? Just because it's like too intense for your small child does not make it a bad movie. I don't get those kind of reviews. Like, if it's a dark movie, don't watch it. If you don't like dark movies, don't watch it. And if you don't want to bring your kid to a dark movie, don't. But anyway, yeah, great freaking movie. I would honestly say the best Batman movie. This movie was great, damn near perfect. There were a few small things I had problems with. A certain scene I wasn't a huge fan of. Anyway, this movie, rating. Honestly, after seeing it twice and thinking about it, it's really hard because I can't give a movie a perfect score. That's impossible. I'm not going to lie and say like 10 out of 10. You know, there's no perfect movies out there. However, this is so damn close to being perfect. I would probably put it at a... For now, I'm gonna have to go with a 9.5. That might lower. Usually my rating's lower as I see the movie more and more, and I can either see more of its flaws or I just get, like, the magic kind of wears off and I just get a little tired of it. But for right now, 9.5, I would say, which is kind of average. Some people are going more like, you know, 8, 7, whatever. Some people are going like 10 out of 10. So yeah, I'd say 9.5. That seems like a pretty good number to me, yeah. If you liked this review, check out our other movie reviews. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe and comment and share. Or, you know, if you really want to personally hurt me, you can go ahead and leave a dislike, or even better, leave a nasty comment. Those always make me cry. Check out our podcast, social media down there, description. Bye.